welcome to another episode of Well Capitalized. I'm your host, Bobby Kingsbury, Managing Director at MCM Capital Partners. We've been getting some comments from business owners on our YouTube channel, specifically about diligence questions in an M&A transaction. So today, I thought we'd touch base on the legal diligence side of it. And with me today, I have Brent Pietrafese from Calfee, Halter Griswold. Brent, thanks for joining me today, man. Appreciate you being here.
Happy to do it.
Brent, can you provide a little bit of your background for the folks listening today?
So I started at Calfee in 2003. I've been there 17 years. I am currently the head of the M&A practice. I also head up our family office practice. I spend probably 2/3 of my time doing mergers and acquisitions transactions, primarily in the private equity space, and then the other third is general corporate contract matters and things that sort of drive from the M&A practice.
Appreciate that. So a lot of the business owners that have been watching these episodes have been asking about the diligence process and, trying to become educated as to what it entails. Can you just describe initially the folks that are involved from your firm on the M&A transaction side from a legal diligence standpoint?
Yeah, so on the buy side, depending on the type of the target, we will bring in specialists from all of our practice areas to take a look at various aspects of the business. So we'll bring in real estate professionals, we'll bring in employee benefits, labor, intellectual property, government contracting, government relations, and basically anything else that would impact or could take a look at what the target business was doing.
So there's a lot of folks involved from your firm in the process.
There can be. Again, it's not necessarily always that universe of people. It's really target specific. But in most instances, that's the general team that we bring to the table.
So what type of information, would be requested by your legal team from the business owner?
So we start with a general overview request list, which is, at first glance daunting, but there's a lot of questions that we just need to ask so somebody can say,
yes or no.
Yeah, this doesn't apply to us, it's not applicable. But it also gets people thinking about things, which is what we really want through the diligence process, to people think critically about their business and to provide as much information as they can. So we break it up into, and I think we're going to post a sample diligence questionnaire as part of this video, but we break up the requests by practice area. So there'll be a general corporate request section that gets into information about the business, governing documents, operating agreements, stockholders agreements, your formation documents, things like that. Then we'll have a separate section for labor and employment that gets into anything related to employment contracts, employee manuals, things that impact the rank and file employees. We'll have a benefits section that really digs into employee benefits, 401k plans, things like that. Real estate, anything having to do with whether you own or lease your real estate, anything having to do with the operation of the plants, things like that. And then intellectual property is the other big one, which gets into trade secret, any registered IP, things like that. And then, again, depending on the target, if there's a government contracting piece, we have a whole separate section for government contracting.
Now, if I'm a business owner and I get this list, again, it's voluminous, it can seem daunting. Mm-hmm. What if I'm looking at it and I say, what, I don't know the answer to this. I don't even know if I have this information. What in that situation, what do business owners typically do?
So if they don't know the answer, that's a good reason to go hire a lawyer. Yeah. And I know it sounds somewhat self-serving, but you really do yourself a disservice if you're trying to navigate one of these processes without legal counsel who does this on a regular basis.
Right.
We run into a lot of people who have had a historic relationship with their lawyer who's been sort of their de facto outside general counsel, helping with contracts and things like that, but doesn't do M&A on a regular basis. And that goes one of two ways. It goes really well or it goes really poorly. And when it goes really poorly, you get it because people, when they don't know what they're doing, tend to ask a lot of questions and be obstructionist about things because they don't understand what the process is because they don't do it on a regular basis. Or it goes really easy, and when I mean really easy, it goes really easy for us because they don't know what they don't know.
Right.
And we can generally run the show when it comes to that. So you're really doing yourself a disservice by not having competent counsel.
Understood. So or advice for business owners would be, certainly suggest hiring a counsel that's familiar with the M&A transaction process.
Yeah, and again, I know people don't want to spend money on that on the front end, but you really, in the long run, are going to save yourself money by having somebody protecting your interests on the front end, because this is one of those instances where, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. If you do things right on the front end, you're going to really be able to save yourself some money and some headaches on the back end.
Yeah. So how long generally will the process take, and then who from the company actually needs to be involved in the diligence request process?
So, it depends on how prepared you are. If you're prepared, the process can be pretty short, because really the time, in my experience, the things that take a lot of time are for the seller to respond to the requests. Mm-hmm. The buyer team is ready to dive in and look at the documents and review it and do that piece of it relatively quickly. And we've done it in as little as 2 weeks. But what usually takes time is, as we pointed out before, is going through that list, finding all the things that are responsive for it, the documentation, answering the questions, getting people that may not be involved in the process, which leads to your second question. Usually at the beginning, there's, the business owner is the primary person who's involved. They will then expand it out to usually their head of finance, whether it's a controller or a CFO or whatever, because obviously there's going to be a lot of financial diligence that comes into play, which isn't the point of this talk, but those are really the two main people that are involved in a deal. But you'll then have to pull people in as the questions, sort of spread out through the organization. You're going to need somebody to come, that can understand the operations, sales, things like that. So the group of people can expand, depending on what you're looking at.
Yeah, which gets back to, on a couple of our other videos, we talked with prior business owners and discussed when to tell your broader team, your executive management team, obviously post LOI, when you begin diligence, these type of requests, you're going to need their help. As a business owner, you can't facilitate all these requests from legal, financial, tax, insurance, marketing. It's too difficult. And then on top of it, run your business. So they have to bring it to the broader team.
Right. And I think that gets to another point around this on the diligence side, where I think business owners can really save themselves time and energy and do themselves a favor by hiring a good team, outside of the people that are inside the organization. So you can, like we said, hire a good attorney who knows what they're doing. Make sure your accountant, your outside accountant, knows what they're doing. Your insurance broker, hire a good insurance broker. And if you're going to do a marketed process, make sure you do your diligence and hire a good investment banker.
So I think that dovetails pretty well in, aside from hiring the right team, what else can a business owner do to best prepare themselves for the legal diligence process? Because you had mentioned it could take 2 weeks, it could take 4 to 6 weeks, just depends on how prepared that business owner is. So for a business owner potentially thinking about a transaction, how can they best prepare from a legal diligence standpoint?
So again, hire a good team, make sure you've got a good team of professionals around you, and secondarily, be organized. And I know that's hard for a lot of people who are running their own business to sort of get out of the day-to-day and make sure that they're thinking strategically and critically around the other aspects of their business. But you need to be organized. You need to know where your contracts are. You need to know what's going on with the regulatory environment for your business. You need to know where all your corporate documents are, and make sure that you're following your corporate documents, that you're following your corporate formalities, and you've looked at you've got a buy-sell agreement, you've looked at that kind of thing. All your corporate records are in order. So, one thing that makes a lot of sense is to go out and do your own diligence process, when you have time. So take one of those diligence lists, go through it, try to make sure you understand what is being asked of you, and that you've got things that are responsive to that, and the things that you have are all complete, signed, all the exhibits are there. I can't tell you how many times we've run through a process and it turns out that a major contract that they were marketing as being an important piece of the business isn't signed, isn't complete. Those are all things that a buyer's going to look at and say, hey, that's great that you think you have this contract, but legally speaking, you don't. And as a result, we're going to ding you on purchase price. Another terrible example of that is intellectual property and IT. I can count 3 times in the last 18 months where we had a major piece of IT come up as not being owned by the company that they thought they owned, because they didn't read their contract, they didn't go through the right process on the front end, and they had an in-house developed proprietary software that turned out that they didn't own it. And we went through the diligence process, and all along the sellers, in all 3 instances, we know we own that, we own that, we own that, we own that, and then relatively short amount of time prior to closing, we found out that they didn't, and it caused a major headache. And
did it crater the deal at all, or did it still get done?
Almost cratered one. It delayed it extensively until we could negotiate with the third party who did own the IT to get ownership to the company, which cost a lot of money, a lot of time. And in the other 2 times, one time there was a significant holdback, and then the other time there was a significant reduction in purchase price.
Interesting. So that's a good piece of advice for business owners. And we discussed preparation and then the timing of the diligence. Can you tell the business owners watching or listening, generally, what are the most common factors that hold up a transaction from a diligence standpoint?
It's usually one of 2 things. It's usually a third-party relationship. So if you have a lease, or
we've been through that before.
Been through that before, yeah. So if you have a lease with a third-party landlord who really doesn't care that you have a deal going on, in most instances, you'll either need a consent or some other, a release or something from that, depending on how you're financing. Unless you might need a waiver or a collateral access agreement or something. So something that's going to impact, you're going to need a signature from the landlord for.
And they have no motivation.
And there's no motivation
right.
to do it. And if they are motivated, in a lot of instances, they may want to renegotiate or, charge a fee or,
right.
So the sooner you can get out in front of those issues, the better. So you're not trying to negotiate that at the 11th hour when you're trying to get a deal closed and you've got 9 zillion other things that have come up. Right. So that's the one. And it's landlord's a perfect example because we've been through it and it's more common than not. But there's others too, right? So there's other third-party contracts where you need a consent or you need somebody else at the table that, while you and the buyer are motivated to get the deal done, the third parties typically aren't. Mm-hmm. So they're on their own timeline. And similarly, if you have a government contracting relationship or a material permit or something like that where you're dealing with a government agency or a quasi-government agency, they also aren't typically very motivated to get things done and take a long time to get things done. So again, you want to get out in front of that and understand that on the front end so that you're not waiting to get that thing done.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I'm going to leave you with one last question for the business owners. What, other than preparation, and you've given them some good points, to prepare themselves, what other piece of advice would you give them going into an M&A transaction?
Be prepared for it to take a long time, and be prepared to be asked a lot of questions about your business that may come across or seem offensive or seem like the other party doesn't trust you.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, they have to do their diligence. And they have to make sure that they're asking all of those questions to get answers to them because they have people that they report to mm-hmm. that are going to be asking them the same questions. So in a lot of instances, right, there's a third-party lender involved. And while we're doing the diligence on the target, as a buyer, the bank is doing diligence on the deal, and we're having to respond to the bank, and the bank really doesn't care.
Right.
So, it's going to seem like a long process. It's going to seem like you're being asked a lot of questions that, because you're in the business, the answer to. Why that's not an issue. I don't, why are you asking me about this contract with the guy that I've been, friends with for 30 years? Of course that contract's good. Well, that. A third party, independent third party doesn't. So they're going to ask those questions and they need to be answered. And it's an important piece of the deal because it will inform the buyer as to the level of risk and that they can underwrite. And at the end of the day, it all impacts purchase price. So the more understanding and forthcoming you can be with information and the more organized you are, the better it's going to be for you in the long run and the less impact it's going to have on potential purchase price.
Yeah. Well, Brent, I appreciate that. You know, a lot of thoughtful points for business owners to consider from an M&A transaction standpoint, especially on the diligence side. So thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for taking the time to watch another episode of Well Capitalized. Please subscribe to our channel below. And if you have any additional questions, please leave them in the comments section. Thank you.